Good evening. Welcome to our program tonight, Women to Women. I'm Carol Paz, your hostess, and we have a very special guest, a first ever on our show. But first, I'd really like to thank a very special sponsor, the Carson Nugget, and Star Anderson, General Manager of the Carson Nugget, who has backed us for this part one and for our second show next week, part two. So we thank the Carson Nugget, whose motto is, "We're always there for you," and they certainly are. We'd also like to have you see us on carsonnow.org, which is the place to go for the 24/7 news of the Carson City area. So with that, let me introduce, for the first time ever, a gentleman, Sheriff Kenny Furlong. Thank you, Sheriff.
Thank you so much.
You are a brave man. All right. You know what I'd like to do, Sheriff, is just a little bit of background on you for our viewing audience.
Oh, that's pretty great.
And then we're going to break in, and our audience is going to see several of our residents here in Carson City, as well as from outside the area, ask some questions that they feel not only the general public would be interested in knowing what your opinion and your answers are from a professional background, but also, in particular, women. Who have these questions, and these are women who are in business who are asking the questions. Mm-hmm. They're regular residents of Carson County as well as Douglas County.
Very good.
So we thank you so much. All right, Sheriff, are you native-born Nevadan?
Yep, I was born right here in Carson City. In fact, right here at the Sheriff's Department, I was born about a block away from here.
Oh, you know, it's good to have native Nevadans on. There are many people who come to the western part of this country who are from the east, the south, and especially from California, from the west, okay? So it's great to have a native. Thank you, thank you. All right, help us understand, Sheriff, where did this love for law enforcement, do you think, where does it come from? Were you affected as a child? Did you watch a lot of Barney Fife? I don't know.
It's not quite that elaborate.
Okay.
As I grew up, my father was actually a police officer and then a deputy sheriff here as the county merged together and it became one entity. I grew up right close to here. Many of the officers that were working here in this town, they were the iconic heroes of mine. I remember the day, the entire vision of watching the sheriff of then Hornsby County and performing, and I was 6 years old. I set my sights on it, and I never let it go.
Okay. So this is something, and this happens with children, doesn't it? Especially little boys, when they see a figure of authority, someone who has the respect and the love of a community. Something happens inside a child's heart, and it must have happened inside of yours.
It did, and I'm glad you brought that up, and that's so much of what we stress today. You can never tell what a child is thinking, and you've always got to create that most positive role model, because a child is grasping onto that, and it may dictate to some degree what his future is and how he succeeds in life, he and she.
Yes, it absolutely did with yours.
It did with mine.
All right, so help us understand, what is part of your training to come in as sheriff of Carson City? I know in our discussion a little bit before the show, you have a military background as well.
Yes. Yeah, I graduated from Carson High School and saw the educational value. I really wanted to work here in the Sheriff's Department, but I knew it was a very extraordinarily competitive field. So I set my eyes on education. And there was a bright light out there that said, you know what, I can get experience in the military, I can get assistance with my college in the military, I can grow in the military. So I did. I joined the military, the Air Force, and spent 20 years. During that 20-year period, I gained a lot of experience as a major crimes investigator for the Office of Special Investigations, got through with my bachelor's degree in criminal justice, and really set the tone for that childhood vision that I had always wanted.
But you prepared for it.
I prepared
you
for
did
it
your
every
homework.
step along the way.
Yes.
And you know, I've got a lot of people to thank for it, even the family, because they had to give up so much in order to go to school at night, work the shifts of the things, and the unexpected emergencies that I would have to go out on and work.
Well, I know that you are a very popular sheriff. You're very well liked, but you also take your job, I see in your facial expressions and with your background, you take it seriously.
Well, very, very much so.
Yes. And times are changing, and so some of the questions that we're going to introduce to you, Sheriff, this evening come from regular Carson City residents. So I'm going to ask these ladies that when they come up, this is like a town hall meeting, and feel free to not only inform us, but help us understand better as citizens what it is that we can do to also make a difference and to become more involved. Because I know that there's a sense of cooperation that's very much needed between the public and between law enforcement.
You know, Carol, it's funny you bring this up because I had a meeting today just specific to that topic. And yes, a lot of folks are here in this town. They were born here. They were raised here. They know our way. They know our history. They know our background. But the value of the folks that have moved here is immeasurable because they saw something that would better their lives, and this was the town they picked to move to.
That's me. That's me.
Extraordinary value there.
Thank you from all of us. All right, let's have our first guest come up, please. As she approaches the podium, she's going to introduce herself and ask her question to the sheriff. So go ahead, please.
Good evening, Carol and Sheriff Furlong. My name is Joetta Brown, and I am the Western Regional Director for the Alliance for Retired Americans. Thank
Welcome.
you for this opportunity. My question is, how serious is the alcohol and drug abuse issues among women, men, and young adults?
It's a very, very important question.
Okay, thank you for asking that, Joanna.
Much of our society over the years, we have said, but for drugs, alcohol, those types of enabling defensive mechanisms, if you will, have allowed people to act out of character. We very often say this person is not that type when he's not drinking or not using drugs. It's interesting to see how times have changed in the very recent history, and I say very recent as in the past 10 years.
Okay.
We have seen an enormous amount of females becoming more and more engaged in the drug abuse and ending up being incarcerated. In fact, on a routine basis, our detention facility, which is only about 10 years old, we have the most impact right there because it's almost always at its maximum capacity. I think that our society, our culture has come together, and there's less of a difference between male and female. It's that partying syndrome. And it has caused quite a bit of an enormous problem. When we look at quality of life in a community, we talk about crime rates. And one of those factors is the term simple assaults. And those are most often related to alcohol abuse. And it's the single biggest issue that we have here in Carson is that simple, keep your hands off one another type of activity, very often associated with alcohol.
Okay, and thank you, Joetta, so much. You know, that question implies, as you said, in the past 10 years, change. And you're seeing more of it, not less of it.
We are seeing much more, especially amongst the women. Obviously, our detention population is about 80% male.
Okay.
That's about what it is. But that section of the jail, that environment that is dedicated to the female population is nearly always at a capacity today.
Wow. Our second guest is approaching, and as she introduces herself, again, women out there, and probably men as well, who are listening, consider the advice, consider the knowledge that the sheriff is giving us with which to work in our own lives, Yes.
Hi, my name's Liz Andrews Booth, and I'm president of the Downtown Business Association and owner of Liz's Biz. And first of all, I'd like to start commending Sheriff Furlong on his activities and participation, enthusiasm, and all of the events and activities we plan in here, and your DARE program, which I do believe won 12th out of 15,000.
Yes, thank you.
So, and that's a big support from you. So,
Thank you.
Kudos to you.
Appreciate
and thanks.
that. Thank you.
Thank you.
My question is, in this 21st century, in your opinion, how have the roles of women changed in law enforcement?
That's a very good question, and I'm going to fall back a little bit back to my childhood. When I was growing up here, there were females employed by the sheriff's office, then the police department. They were primarily in the dispatch center, and they were referred to as matrons.
Now that would have been during the 1980s, 1990s.
We better go a little bit further back than that.
Okay.
back to about the 50s and 60s.
All right.
And the interesting piece of that was females were not looked favorably upon to
Why
say,
not?
go down to the Nugget without a male escort and
Okay.
dine. Back then, females had a very, very structured environment that they would have to be inside of. But times have changed and we have grown. Those female matrons grew into staff members, and those staff members grew into officers. And today we see those officers actually growing into the leaderships of many of our organizations all over the country. So times really have changed in the short time that you and I have just been living. And a lot of progress has been made. It's no longer shameful for a female to, at 1 o'clock in the morning, to stop in at the Nugget, which was the place back in the 50s where most of the Carsonites would go to eat late at night. It's no longer shameful. Today, it's leadership. It's a very, very good question. We've come a long ways.
Certainly have. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you so
Thank you.
much. So until our next guest arrives, Sheriff, why do you suppose women have taken such a long time? Is it because of their own fears of stepping out into the public with that sense of authority, or leadership in legal matters, in law enforcement matters? Or do you think that there was kind of a glass lid on top of them?
You know, I hope to say that it preceded my birth and it was a glass lid.
Okay.
And that somewhere along the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, that lid came off. And a recognition of you doing the job versus me doing the job. The point of the matter is, what are we producing? What is the end result?
Right.
And there really is not a definable difference in you completing it or me. It's the same task, and we refer to it as equal pay for equal work.
If we're qualified.
If we're qualified, yes.
Okay, let's ask our third guest. Please introduce yourself.
Good evening. My name is Connie Friend, and I am lead pastor at Capital Christian Center here in Carson City. And my question is this. You as sheriff keep watch over the entire population. However, statistics show that about 20% of our population is under the age of 14. So my question is, what do you see as law enforcement that is the most pivotal age for us to grab hold of a child and influence them? And what can parents do at that age to really help?
I appreciate the question, because that actually does spark to a change in my administration directions that I have been given. In the past 10 years, we have focused a lot of attention on our elementary school level of kids. As I said, I was 6 years old. I had this fantasy of becoming a police officer. And we focused a lot of attention on our high school level kids, those that are just about to enter adulthood and into our societies. But what I believe today, and where we have changed some of our courses, is to focus more in on the middle school. In very, very short, a child is born and spends the first 10 years of his life up to about the 5th grade level with mom, dad, and teacher, singular.
Right.
And these three persons are pivotal in their lives. But at the age of middle school, they all of a sudden are expected to do things on their own, take care of themselves, bring their homework home, get to class on their own. We're expecting more of our middle school kids than ever before, and I think that we needed to recognize it, and so a lot of attention has been pushed to the middle school age. I think that it is a critical point in a child's life and development.
I know in Connie's question, as a retired elementary teacher, 5th grade teacher, I could see the nurturing of the elementary years, and then suddenly grades 6, 7, and 8 bursting forth with all of these choices, movements, a lot of movement from classroom to classroom, bigger classes, less attention, one would think, given by a middle school teacher to the homework, to the overall work. Actually, it's there, but in a different way. And I always worried that once they left the elementary school, what was going to happen to them? Had I done a job to send them into that 6th grade woohoo arena?
If those 5th graders, the the pure pleasure of those fifth graders was at our high school graduation. We'd have a different world. They are so polite at that fifth grade level. And I'm not to say that anything's wrong with the high school, but there is a big difference.
Yes.
Right as we step from elementary school into a middle school environment, and that's traumatic on social developments.
So you're saying in response to Connie's questions, the middle school area is the place
It is
to
the
focus.
place. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Connie, so much. And as we continue with our next guest, and our next three guests, as a matter of fact, we'll be right back, but we're going to take a small break, so don't go away. Thank you, Sheriff Furlong. Thank you.
A fire-adapted community is prepared to survive a wildfire with little or no firefighter assistance. To help prevent ignition by embers, remove dead and dying plants from around your home. Be sure to remove low-hanging branches and the flammable plants underneath your trees, also known as ladder fuels. Non-flammable plants and pathways create separation and help prevent fire from spreading to your home. Make it lean, clean, and green.
Visit livingwithfire.info for more tips to save your home.
Welcome back to the second portion of Women to Women. We are so fortunate to have Sheriff Furlong with us. He is the first man ever to come on this program, and he's doing fabulously, okay? We also want to thank the Carson Nugget and Star Anderson General Manager for being the sponsor of not only this program, but next week's program as well. And you can always watch us on carsonnow.org. So let's turn back to Sheriff Furlong. We had several guests, okay, who got involved with their concerns here in Carson City and the interaction of the Sheriff's Department, the law enforcement agencies that we have here with the general public. And we have another guest coming up. Would she please visit with us? And it's great to know, it really is, Sheriff, that you have that background in the military, you have the investigative training, that background, because it does reassure me as a person who came in just 3.5 years ago to know that I have someone who is alert, who's well educated, and who is very attentive to the citizens here. And you do that. You do that.
Thank you.
All right. Would you please introduce yourself and let's have that question.
Carol Howell. I'm a resident of Carson City. My question to you, Sheriff Furlong, I understand you have a very large volunteer group here that works and helps you in this department. How many of those are women, and what kind of positions or jobs do they function?
Our volunteer organization is very large. Thank you, Carol. They're absolutely instrumental in us performing our all of the jobs that we do. In fact, our volunteer organization, each year we celebrate them at an annual dinner. While I have 134 employees, every year we celebrate over 150 volunteers.
Wow.
Just last year, they accounted for over 35,000 hours of work given back to this community. They do a fantastic job. The males and the females, I would guesstimate just right off the cuff, probably about 25% of our volunteers are females. And they work in a variety of positions, all the way from clerical to search and rescue, actually going out there on the hillsides and retrieving and helping to find and doing all of these.
Wonderful.
We have females within our law enforcement and mounted units. They're spread everywhere. The key is their willingness to want to get involved and engaged. And when they do that, it's just almost a no-brainer. Come on aboard. We really do appreciate all that they do.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. You know, it's amazing. Until you give us those facts and figures, we're not aware of how much the community really wants to be a part of helping out.
You've been very, very complimentary of the Sheriff's Department tonight. We could not do what we do in this community without our volunteerism. It's just an amazing organization.
That's great. Our next guest, please. Yes.
Hi, Sheriff.
Hi.
My favorite sheriff, by the way. My name is PJ DeGrosse, and I'm founder of webofsupport.com Soldier Adoption Program and the First Military Wives Club. Sheriff Furlong, I want to talk to you about something that is very near and dear to my heart, and a subject that oftentimes is not discussed or hidden for fear of inaction or retribution. How would you advise women who are being stalked and verbally harassed by someone who actually turns out to be a neighbor?
You know, it's a very, very good question, and because those people that are the victims of these types of incidents often feel the world's walls crushing in on them. They feel fear, they feel intimidation. There is an embarrassment if I reach out for help, or a sense of no one's going to listen to me. The reality of it is very, very simple. I do believe very strongly in our court systems here, and when you have these circumstances come up, using the court systems, using the sheriff's office, using your friends and neighbors can be the best options. If it does take it down to a what we would call a stalking or a harassment order, those are the orders that allow the police officer or the sheriff's deputy on the street to take an action, because it takes away his opinion and he can be neutral and understand what the circumstances are. A judge has already heard them and will take an effective action at that point.
And let me just add one more thing. What if that person is a repeat offender? At what point is there further action taken?
If it has a court document behind it, it's going to result in an action every time.
Great, thank you.
Okay,
Thank you so much.
You know, it's a concern of every woman who's out by herself, because it seems like, you know, media brings to our attention on a daily, sometimes an hourly basis, violence. And sometimes women just don't know, okay, I sense that there is a real problem with a neighbor. I sense it's a real problem of someone else with me. Where do I go? What do I do?
Right.
And it's an immediate need.
You know, Carol, you said the word that is most often brought into this building. I sense, but I don't know. The reality of it is, if you sense it, you already know there is a problem.
There's a problem. Our next guest, please. Welcome.
Hi. My question, my name is Yara, and I'm the president of United Latino Community, a nonprofit that serves our community. My question is, you said you had about 130 some employees.
Yes.
Some of them are women, and I know. What do women bring to the table as police officers that men don't? Because we're great.
There's a challenge for you.
Because I know we're great.
I know
I want to
you
know
are
if you
too.
know that.
There's the gauntlet.
Yes. You know, women do bring something into law enforcement that back in those 60s and the 50s that we were talking about didn't exist. And that's a reality, that there are certain things within law enforcement that we would just as soon lean towards the public point of view for assistance on. For example, Carol's never been arrested, I promise.
No, I haven't.
But God forbid she should. There are certain activities that should be held to the female role. In as much as possible, we would like to hold to that.
Such as?
Such as searching in a jail environment.
Okay.
Where it really gets personal.
Personal. Somebody putting their hands on me.
Because we don't have a lot of females, many times we're forced to use a male. And we have to train our males to do it very, very efficiently and almost write down a checklist. Because there is still a tense environment between the male putting his hands on the female body.
Right.
So we do our best to provide for those females. Certainly there's not always one available. But even beyond that, a female can be as effective on the street as any male out there.
I knew that. Just making sure you knew that. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
That is
Yarsa.
absolutely a true statement. It's not a matter of their gender. It's a matter of, are they capable, are they trained, and do they exercise the right judgment out there?
Yes, and isn't that true, Sheriff? Wherever we are working or serving the public is expecting a professional background, a professional approach. And if that's not there, that environment just breaks down.
It breaks down very, very quickly because you have two opposing factors coming at one another. one, my perception of my ability to handle your problem, and your perception of my ability to handle your problem.
That's right.
And if they don't meet equally, you can actually elevate the level of confrontation right off the get.
Yes, and whether it's a female officer or a male officer, that initial approach that they make to you kind of sets that scene
You're
up.
absolutely right. We teach that in the smallest of kids. That's that first impression.
All right, I think we have another guest waiting. Please come up. Welcome to our program, Women to Women. What is your question, dear?
Good evening. It's my pleasure to be here, to be invited to this program, Woman to Woman.
Thank you.
Yeah, my question is, my name is Marta Coscarat. I could honor of be a basket deli. My question is, what can a woman do if she notices a driver follow her?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Clearly, it was just a few weeks ago that we had a very, very horrific incident here in Carson City.
Yes.
And her question does speak to the point of that. While one would hope that never occurs, we know, in fact, it does.
It does.
And there's that conflict. Well, we don't want you talking on your cell phone while you're driving. The point of the matter is, if you feel unsafe at all, either get off that roadway to the nearest help point, and that's always an option. We can use your gas station. Stop at a store and get inside and ask for help. If worst case scenario were to come up, yes, I know it's against the law. I already understand that piece. Get on that cell phone and dial 911. Okay, so that we can quickly get somebody into the area. And of course, if you do see an officer in the area, make some sort of an attraction, honking the horn, flashing at your lights to get his attention. It is critical. People have a right to feel safe in their community. And anybody who imposes upon that right needs to be stopped. But we have to know that it's taking place. And so whatever you can do. But my best advice is immediately, if you feel you're in danger, get to an area, very often a public area, where you can get away from that person and summon help right away.
Okay, thank you.
And I think, Martha, something else that just came to my mind that Sheriff Furlong addressed. If I am I'm alone by myself in a car, and I recognize, I have that sense that I am being tailed, I'm being followed. I don't know the reason necessarily, but Sheriff Furlong struck something with me when he said, lay on that horn, make all the noise you can, and keep that attention coming towards that car that's making all that noise, because sooner or later, it's going to make a difference, okay? I can't imagine any stalker wanting to bear the brunt of all that attention. So that's a very good question. It's a very relevant question to the age that we live in, whether we live rurally or in the city.
It is.
Yes. Thank you so much,
you.
Martha. Thank you. Okay, so Sheriff Furlong, you've addressed a number of issues here that women, I think, can learn a lot from. They've probably been in some of those situations and didn't know whether or not to share it, to talk about it in any way with anybody. But would you say, in summing up our program tonight, that the public is better informed now than they ever were before in terms of what to do, how to act?
I think you're absolutely right, and I've often said this in public forums. You know, Colin Powell was interviewed by Larry King.
Okay.
And he said, would you ever wish for the good old days back? Well, in the good old days, we were hiding things and not talking about them. And I think today we are.
And that's a key. We can end right there, Sheriff. Let's not hide things that need to be discussed and brought out in public, because it's good for all of us. It's the protection of the public.
That's right.
Thank you so much for being our guest
Thank you.
tonight.
I appreciate it so very, very much.
Oh, and we look forward to seeing you next week with us again.
Thank you.
In the meantime, consider everything you've heard tonight, and we'll be back next week with Sheriff Furlong again. And our very special thanks again to the Carson Nugget, Star Anderson. They are there. They say we're there for you, and they have been. Thank you. Have a good evening. Good night, everyone.